She was a glamorous American whose beauty rivaled that of any woman in the world. A movie star born to play the role of a princess. And in 1956, as if by destiny, Grace Kelly was cast in that role when she married one of the world's most eligible royal bachelors, Prince Rainier of Monaco. Through pageantry and tragedy, joy and scandal, their lives and the lives of their children would forever be lived in the blinding glare of paparazzi. And within a single generation, a quiet monarchy, 7 centuries old, would undergo a remarkable transformation and become a dazzling star on the international stage. Wealth, power, glamour, romance and tragedy. These are the Grimaldis, royal family of Monaco. Monaco. The name is synonymous with warm, inviting waters, the glint of chips in Monte Carlo casinos, and the deep almond-colored tans of Monaco's wealthy tourists. Less than a square mile in size, Monaco is the second smallest country in the world. Only the Vatican is smaller. But Monaco is not about size. This land of luxury is about wealth. In fact, the country is so flush with prosperity that its 5,000 citizens, called Monegasques, enjoy living tax-free. And yet, despite its reputation for wealth, Monaco is, most of all, a land defined by the 1950s fairy tale romance of Prince Rainier and Princess Grace, and by the trials of their children, Albert, Caroline, and Stephanie. They are the members of the Grimaldi family, and for nearly 50 years they have been the objects of fascination, their every move recorded and critiqued by a relentless press. Perhaps appropriate, since Monaco has always had its share of drama and adventure. Once it was just a well-positioned fortress on a barren cliff. That is, until the 13th century, when a sly Grimaldi disguised in a monk's robe seized the fortress of Monaco and claimed it for the Grimaldi family. A dynasty was born. And so, for over 700 years, longer than any other royal family in Europe, the Grimaldis have held on to their place in the sun. But it wasn't until the reign of Prince Rainier that the small nation came into the international spotlight. Prince Rainier was born in 1923, the second child produced from the uncomfortable arranged marriage of Monaco's Princess Charlotte and Prince Pierre.
It was a bitter, unhappy marriage. And they had 2 children, Antoinette and Rainier, and they just basically fought with each other tooth and nail, and like any other couple, the children suffered.
Then in 1949, at the age of 26, fate handed the young prince his life's role. The death of his grandfather, Prince Louis II, left the nation in Rainier's hands. He became His Serene Highness Prince Rainier III, the 33rd Grimaldi to rule Monaco. Now all he needed was a princess to help him rule his kingdom. And she would come from the most unlikely place. Another kingdom, known as Hollywood. In 1955, a young American movie star from Philadelphia named Grace Kelly was in Cannes, France for the film festival. Paris Match magazine wanted to do a cover story on Kelly and suggested a photo shoot in nearby Monaco at the Prince's Palace. She agreed. After the shoot, the prince took his enchanting guest on a tour of the palace grounds.
After that meeting, they both were so taken with each other that they courted each other via letters and telephone, and in a short time, virtually in 4 months, they were engaged.
A fairy tale romance come true, the lovely maiden and the lonely prince. Looking at the happy couple, the world was happy too, for their love story held all the wonderful, improbable elements which people everywhere like to imagine can come true.
Fantasy, myths, ancient beginnings. Elevate your historical exploration to unparalleled heights with a History Hits subscription. Don't miss out on our latest releases, where classicist Natalie Haynes travels to Corfu to unravel the story of the Gorgon Medusa, one of the most iconic yet misconstrued figures of Greek mythology. Join Jasmine Elmer as she dives into something that people have been obsessed with throughout history: dragons. Where did they come from? What exactly is a dragon? Finally, Dan Snow explores the ancient history of the Isles of Scilly and discovers burial grounds built thousands of years ago. Discover hundreds of hours of award-winning documentaries and ad-free podcasts with History Hit. Sign up for a special offer via the link in the description.
Grace Kelly was the perfect choice for a princess. A devout Catholic, she was of the same faith as the Grimaldis, who have held strong ties to the Vatican for centuries. She came from a wealthy Irish-American family, and to top it off, she was a wildly popular Academy Award-winning actress.
Amy.
I mean it. If you won't go with me now, I'll be on that train when it leaves here.
I've got to stay.
But more than anything, Grace epitomized the glamour of the silver screen.
Grace Kelly had a tremendous fashion sense that was emulated by women around the world. She was very much someone who could carry off very cool, elegant looks, but also looked terrific in blue jeans, which she often wore off the set.
The wedding was set for the spring of 1956. In April, Grace boarded the SS Constitution and set sail for Monaco.
Just getting married is a very big step for any girl, and of course, I have a great many feelings about that, and it's a very exciting thing, and I'm very, very happy. Of course, I'm a little sad to be leaving home, but I hope to be back quite often.
Her entourage of more than 65 included bridesmaids, her family and friends, and she didn't pack lightly.
When she set sail for Monaco to prepare for her wedding, she brought with her $200,000 worth of clothes. She brought fur coats, she brought couture suits, she brought blue jeans, and at one point, whoever was helping her pack for the trip said, "Are you going to wear all these clothes?" And she said, "Of course I am."
It took 4 steamer trunks, 20 hat boxes, and dozens of other assorted cases to carry her wardrobe, which included lingerie from Los Angeles and new sets of clothes designed just for her by Neiman Marcus in Dallas. When she arrived in Monaco, her prince was waiting, and so was the press.
It was a circus. There were photographers everywhere. There was no privacy, and it got out of hand. I mean, I don't think Rainier's media handlers could handle such the crush.
Thousands crowded the streets to witness the wedding of the century. It was held in St. Nicholas Cathedral, a church that symbolized the Grimaldis' link to the Catholic faith. Built in 1875, the church had been the setting for nearly every religious event involving the royal family. It was here that Grace ceased to be a movie star and started to be a princess. As Grace was led down the aisle on the arm of her father, the world was awed by the dazzling wedding gown. It was made by an MGM studio seamstress from over 400 yards of silk, tulle, and lace. The bodice was embroidered with rare seed pearls. The antique lace used was 125 years old. It alone cost $2,500 US. On her feet were low satin pumps that assured she would not stand taller than the 5'7" prince. Following the vows, the couple held back tears as they exchanged rings. After the nuptials, a public reception was held at the palace where the Monegasques toasted the newlyweds. Well-wishers presented the newlyweds with wedding gifts worth well over $1 million. But the prince's own gift to his bride surpassed them all. It was her own 150-foot yacht that would carry them off on a month-long honeymoon cruise. When the honeymoon was over, Grace set about the task put before many a new bride, fixing up the house. In this case, a 235-room palace. So Grace went to work airing out the old castle. Fresh paint covered the walls, delicate curtains replaced heavy drapes, bouquets of flowers filled every corner. But Grace and Rainier would soon have more on their minds than picking out patterns. An heir was on the way. In the fall of 1956, Rainier and Grace took a trip to America. The princess was visibly pregnant in her Christian Dior maternity dress when she and her husband were guests of President Eisenhower at the White House. As usual, the press grilled the young newlyweds.
Do you care whether it's a boy or a girl?
Well, a boy would be very nice for the first child, but it really makes no difference. We're just like a nice, healthy baby.
Then, on January 23, 1957, official notice was posted. Princess Caroline had been born. Baby Caroline was next in line to rule Monaco, unless, of course, a brother came along. And he did. Just 1 year and 2 months later, Prince Albert was born. Both Grace and Rainier took to parenting with great enthusiasm and humor. Like their parents, the children couldn't help being drawn into the spotlight. But Grace and Rainier did their best to give them happy, normal lives. Rainier and Grace wanted a large family, but their bid for more children met with heartache until Princess Stephanie was born in 1965.
Grace had suffered several miscarriages between Albert's birth in 1958 and Stephanie's birth in 1965, and Stephanie became the idolized baby of the family.
The Grimaldi family was now complete. They spent summers in America near Grace's family, or at the Grimaldi's cozy French country retreat, Roc Agel. These years were filled with happiness and adventure, but the fairy tale life of the Grimaldis was about to be forever shattered by an unspeakable tragedy. It was a land removed from the world, a lavish garden of marble, crystal, and gold. And on the hill over the city, the prince and princess lived their lives of privilege and promise. Grace and Rainier had reinvented their kingdom. Much of the exotic landscape was built by royal order, and all of it was up to royal standards. Grand ballrooms have held galas attended by heads of state and, of course, the royal Grimaldis. But paradise doesn't come cheap. A simple one-bedroom apartment in this regal wonderland can sell for $600,000. Not a surprise when you realize the land goes for upwards of $25 million an acre. For the super-rich, it was an Eden, a place where any misfortune could be glazed over with guilt and made beautiful again. But on September 13th, 1982, the heart of this Eden would be shattered. Princess Grace and her daughter Stephanie, then 17 years old, set off on a drive back to the palace from their retreat at Roc Agel. It was a short trip to the palace, one she'd taken countless times before, but inexplicably something went terribly wrong. Grace sped straight past one of Monaco's infamous hairpin turns. The rover broke through the barrier wall and tumbled down a 135-foot drop. On September 14, 1982, Princess Grace of Monaco died. She was 52 years old. With Stephanie still recovering in the hospital, millions of television viewers watched the grieving family, Albert holding on to Caroline, Rainier in uniform. Among the royals who came to pay their respects was the young Diana, Princess of Wales. Her presence was more than just royal protocol. Diana's loss was deeply personal. Grace had been a friend and had given her what no one else could, kind words of support from one outsider princess to another. For the children of the Grimaldi family, their mother's loss was hard to bear, and dealing with the grief was even harder, with the press constantly hounding the family.
There'll be an extended report from Monaco.
Caroline was the first member of the new generation to feel the media's glare over her shoulder. It had started back in the mid-1970s. The press was obsessed with recording every trying moment of Caroline's first marriage. Grace wanted her first daughter to marry the young royal prince Ernst of Hanover, attached to England's House of Windsor. But, as the tabloids told it, Caroline's young heart had already been stolen by the French playboy Philippe Junot. He was 17 years older than Caroline and far from a devoted husband.
It was a marriage doomed to failure. Within weeks of the marriage, she knew there were problems because he arranged for honeymoon photos of them to be sold, thus making some money. And Caroline was not happy about this. And within 2 years of the marriage, he claimed he was on a business trip to one place, and Caroline saw in the papers that he was at some parties with some very buxom women, and he lied to her.
In 1980, she filed for divorce. It took another 12 years for the Catholic Church to grant her an annulment. And Caroline's romantic heartaches were not over. In 1983, a year after her mother's death, she married for a second time to Italian real estate developer Stefano Casaraghi. They had 3 children, Prince Andrea, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Pierre. Their marriage, however, ended tragically when Stefano was killed in a speedboat accident.
It was a freak accident. He was into speedboating. He was very rich, so he had lots of very expensive toys. The boat turned over, and he was killed instantly. And she was told, and it was devastating for her.
The death of her husband left Caroline in a state of despair. She tried to remain out of the public eye as much as possible, but the press didn't back down. In 1995, when Caroline began to appear sickly in her public appearances, they reported that she had lost all of her hair, apparently from a medical condition. Caroline endured the scrutiny, as she always had. Eventually her hair grew back, and she once again regained her regal poise and beauty. And on January 23rd, 1999, Caroline's 42nd birthday, her hardships faded away as love once again entered her life. In a private ceremony in the palace that was her childhood home, she married the man her mother had wanted for her from the very beginning, Prince Ernst of Hanover. Despite the challenges in her life and the press scrutiny, Caroline has managed to mature gracefully. More than anyone, she has come to embody the style and glamour inspired by her mother. Like Caroline, Stephanie has struggled to find a place in the world. In the years after her mother's heartbreaking death, Stephanie pursued a myriad of careers. A brief stint as pop singer, during which she sold over 5 million albums, caused eyebrows to rise, as did a short flirtation with the modeling world. As for matters of the heart, Stephanie has had her troubles. In the early 1990s, she was romantically involved with her bodyguard, Danielle Ducré. They had 2 children before marrying in 1995. But Ducré would prove to be a poor husband.
They were married about a year, and he was photographed with Miss Nude Belgium. After the actual event, her father literally ordered her to divorce him. And a few weeks later, they were divorced. So it does help to have a father who, in power.
In the summer of 1998, Stephanie had a third child, but she has kept the identity of the father a secret. As the press scrutinizes her now, they find something less scandalous than they hoped for. That of all Stephanie's many roles, it is motherhood that suits her best. While Stephanie and Caroline have been driven to find their own role in the world, their brother Albert was born with one. He is the heir to Monaco's throne, and will one day take his father's place. With his life planned out before him, Albert is very much a working prince. He is the president of Monaco's Red Cross and even heads the US chapter of the Princess Grace Foundation. But life is not all work. Albert spends as much time as he can on the distraction he enjoys most, athletics. He is both a patron and a player. But as Albert indulges his love of sports, the press has made sport of covering the prince's love life. Especially when it comes to the speculation of who Albert will marry. Like his father 30 years earlier, he finds himself in the daunting position of being one of the world's most eligible bachelors. He's even been linked in the past with such glamorous figures as supermodel Claudia Schiffer. But even though he turned 40 in 1998, the prince has shown no signs of settling down. But even if he doesn't, his destiny is written in stone. As hereditary prince, Albert will one day step into his father's shoes as ruling monarch. And if he does so as a bachelor without a son, the succession will go to Andrea, Princess Caroline's son, which Albert doesn't seem to mind at all. For now, his father, Rainier, is still in charge, as he has been for over 5 decades. He is the longest ruling monarch in Europe. It's been over 15 years since Grace left his life, but Rainier, now in his mid-70s, has held together the family that he and Grace made. But the noble prince will never forget his enchanting bride, nor will Monaco. Grace can never be replaced in the hearts of the Grimaldi family or their monegasque subjects. Even today, images of her and young Rainier taken on their wedding day decorate everything from postcards to postage stamps. Her name marks the halls of art and culture that she nurtured while princess. And the country has never stopped paying their respects. It is in the beautiful church where Grace was wed so long ago that she now lies entombed in marble and granite. And it is here that annually thousands of people still come to bid their final farewells. But as anyone will tell you, Grace's spirit will always be part of this privileged land. And because of her memory, Monaco will forever be known as a place of regality and romance. Accommodations provided by Monte Carlo's luxurious Hotel Hermitage. Wardrobe provided by Lord & Taylor. Japan's Imperial Family. It is the world's oldest hereditary monarchy and its most secretive. For centuries, their subjects could only imagine their regal lifestyle, a lifestyle hidden by the towering walls of their imperial palaces. But over the last 100 years, this shield of secrecy has slowly begun to erode. And perhaps just in time comes a new breed of royal, Princess Masako, an American educated woman so intriguing that she has been dubbed the Japanese Princess Diana. Does her presence on the scene signify changing times for the imperial family? Or will they continue to maintain their ancient ways in a world blazing into the 21st century? Tradition, romance, and Far Eastern intrigue. We now celebrate Japan's chrysanthemum throne on royal families of the world. While many royal families, such as those in Great Britain and Monaco, live their lives under the constant scrutiny of the relentless paparazzi, the Imperial Family of Japan keeps a distance from the press and from the world at large. In fact, the faces of Japan's chrysanthemum throne are hardly known outside of Japan. There is Emperor Akihito with his wife Michiko and their 3 children, including the Crown Prince Naruhito. But the real star of this imperial drama is Prince Naruhito's wife, Masako. She brings to mind the style and grace of the world's most legendary and charismatic royal, Diana. Her presence on the imperial scene has put the spotlight on the royal family more than ever before. And as a result, we're being given a clearer picture of the fascinating and utterly unique traditions and lifestyles of the Japanese royals. Their lives are centered in Tokyo, a bustling metropolis of 8 million people. High-tech, cosmopolitan, congested, it is the embodiment of modern-day Japan. But on a private island in the center of the city, there is an oasis of peace and tranquility, a world of ancient imperialism. Divided from the rest of Tokyo by a moat, this 285-acre island is one of the most valuable pieces of real estate in the world. It is also the site of the Imperial Palace, official home of the Japanese royal family. A Japanese warlord once lived here, and the magnificent ruins of his palace are still standing. The imperial buildings of today have a much simpler design. But the gardens are perhaps its most striking characteristic. People from all over Japan come here at their own expense for the privilege of tending the emperor's gardens. That they can even get this close to the imperial household is amazing when you consider the tradition of secrecy surrounding Japan's royal family. Once it was thought that the emperor was a divine being descended from the sun goddess. He was regarded as the spiritual leader of the Shinto religion. Imperial palaces were reminiscent of heaven, with lush gardens and greenery. Here the emperor was cloistered away and spent his time playing music, writing poetry, painting, and praying at the palace shrines. For 2,000 years, this was the way of imperial life, until the reign of Emperor Hirohito. Born on April 29, 1901, Hirohito was rehearsed in the old divine royal way. Taken away from his family at the age of 1, he was raised in privileged isolation by court chamberlains. When Naruhito was enthroned in 1928, he was treated like a virtual god. But World War II would put an end to the emperor's divinity. After Japan's defeat, the Allies took away all the emperor's political power and forced Naruhito to declare to his people that he was not divine. An era had ended. By that time, Emperor Naruhito already had 4 daughters and, more importantly, a son and heir, Akihito. Born in 1933, Akihito lived an isolated life too.
Akihito's childhood, by all accounts, was pretty miserable. He was sequestered, and his only contacts were with the Imperial Household Agency. In World War II, he was removed from Tokyo and kept in the mountains and at the seashore during the bombing of Tokyo.
But after the war, things changed. Japan began to rebuild with American money and American ideas.
He was then sent off to regular school with other children, and he was probably the first emperor to ever grow up to actually have friends from childhood.
For the first time in his life, Akihito mingled with commoners. But his relationship with one commoner in particular would change the course of Japan's imperial history. Her name was Machiko Shoda, and she was the daughter of a prominent businessman. In 1957, the two met on the tennis court during a game of mixed doubles at a mountain resort. The prince was dazzled.
She was a beautiful, excellent, athletic, vibrant young woman. He lost the tennis match but fell in love.
Never before in the 2,000-year-old history of Japan's imperial family had one of its members married a commoner. Some of the old Japanese aristocracy was outraged by the choice. But Akihito vowed to have his way.
Romance and a fairy tale theme. Prince Akihito of Japan married a commoner, Machiko Shoda, whom he met and wooed on a tennis court.
The wedding was held on April 10, 1959. It was an international event. The public was fascinated. Many Japanese even bought their first television sets so they could see the marriage festivities. Less than 1 year after the grand event, Machiko produced a son and heir.
In Tokyo, first official family scenes of the newest addition to the royal family. Little Prince Hiro with Mother Princess Machiko and Father Crown Prince Akihito. Despite the distinction of the place and the persons, it looks as though fond parents and firstborn babies are just about the same the world over.
Young Prince Naruhito was followed nearly 5 years later by a brother, Akishino, and then a sister, Nori. Unlike their father, the 3 children were raised at home. Their family life was warm, and the formality of previous imperial generations was abandoned. Naruhito, the eldest, grew up strong-minded and scholarly. He had a talent for music. And like his father and grandfather, he had a passion for the sciences. But unlike them, he attended Oxford University in England, the first Japanese heir ever to study abroad. Then in 1989, Naruhito's grandfather, Emperor Hirohito died at the age of 87. Akihito, the prince's father, ascended the throne. After his father's coronation, Naruhito became the new crown prince, and along with the title came pressure for him to marry. But finding an imperial bride isn't as simple as merely dating. There are strict rules of protocol. Naruhito himself once said that finding the right woman to marry was harder than climbing Mount Fuji. A list is drawn up of potential candidates, more than 100 in Naruhito's case, and there are specifications. Prospective brides are expected to be younger and shorter than the prince. There can't be any scandal in their backgrounds, and they must be chaste. At first, none of the prospective brides seemed promising, but in October of 1986, the imperial household held a string quartet recital that doubled as an official bride search party. Naruhito was introduced to a bright, beautiful young woman. Not the usual society girl, she was a diplomat by profession. The prince was immediately smitten. Like his father before him, he had fallen in love with a commoner. Her name was Masako Owada. Masako had grown up in simple style. Her father was a diplomat who moved his family often. When she was a teenager, the family landed in the small town of Belmont, Massachusetts, a wealthy suburb of Boston. Masako and her two younger sisters attended the local public high school. Lillian Katz, Masako's former high school English teacher, remembers meeting her for the first time.
There was something very special about Masako. She was lovely looking and sweet. She was able to speak some English, although her first words to me were, "My English is not very good." But there was a certain confidence and dignity that she had, which is a little unusual for a young girl not quite 16. But she possessed it even then.
Masako eventually went to Harvard and ultimately took a job as a negotiator in Japan's foreign ministry. Then she met the prince. They went on a couple of dates, chaperoned of course. But Masako had a career to think about. In 1988, the Foreign Ministry sent her to Oxford for further study on international relations. The disappointed prince continued his search for a bride. But by 1990, Masako had returned to take a job in Japan. They rekindled their courtship. Then Naruhito asked Masako to marry him. She surprised him by not giving him an answer. In truth, Masako was concerned that imperial life would be too isolated and restricted. She didn't know if she could handle the scrutiny. If history was any judge, she had a right to be concerned. When Naruhito's mother, Empress Machiko, had first married, she was criticized by many of the old guard.
There were tensions over what sort of clothes she would wear, over whether she should carry a purse, over whether she should carry her own child, how much they should be involved in the raising of their own children. But it took its toll, and Michiko suffered a few years after their marriage from an emotional collapse of some kind.
Eventually, Machiko learned to cope with the pressure and returned to the public eye. Now, nearly 30 years later, her son asked her to soothe the fears of his own prospective bride, to explain how she had dealt with the situation. The two had a heart-to-heart talk. Shortly thereafter, Naruhito again proposed, only this time he made a pledge. "Masako, if you marry me, I will protect you for the rest of my life." Masako humbly accepted. Once the engagement was announced, people were intrigued. Would this hard-driving career woman prove to be the appropriate wife to the Crown Prince? And most importantly, would she bring honor to her role as Empress of Japan? From the moment Masako Owada accepted Crown Prince Naruhito's marriage proposal, she was catapulted into the imperial spotlight. Masako mania swept through Japan. Young women looked at this intelligent woman as a great role model. They began wanting the clothes she wore and the music she listened to. One manufacturer even created a Masako doll that, along with a replica of the prince, sold for nearly $2,000.
Although Princess Masako keeps a very low profile in Japan, she has still become a bit of a role model to Japanese women. Whenever she appears in public, whatever she wears sells out immediately.
Masako favored conservative business suits, often with trousers and low-heeled pumps. But as the prince's fiancée, protocol soon became more important than individual style. She spent 2 months studying court rituals, ceremonies, etiquette, and even Japanese poetry. On June 9, 1993, the day of the wedding, crowds of people lined the streets outside the Owada family home to watch Masako get whisked away for her wedding. It was a proud but bittersweet moment for her parents.
I sensed a sadness as far as they were concerned about what the future would hold for Masako, and I think they were very well aware that their relationship would never be the same.
Preparing a Japanese royal bride for marriage involves extraordinarily detailed ritual. Like other imperial brides before her, Masako was ceremonially bathed by special members of the imperial household. Her hair was lacquered into a traditional style. It took hours to put on the traditional wedding kimono. It weighs almost 30 pounds and is made up of 12 layers of the finest silk and fabrics in Japan. The whole ensemble cost an estimated $300,000, incredible for an outfit she would wear less than 30 minutes. Naruhito also dressed in special Shinto robes. The official ceremony was in secret in one of the palace shrines. Finally, they emerged from the inner shrine as man and wife, prince and princess. When the official marriage ceremony of Naruhito and Masako was over, the couple changed from their kimonos into more modern attire. Masako wore a Western-style wedding gown created by one of Japan's most esteemed designers, Madame Hanamori. As with everything imperial, there were special instructions.
At the palace, the Empress presented me with a special silk fabric, a hefty, thick white fabric with gold in it. It was stunning. They said they'd love it if I could use this fabric.
The fabric had been spun from thread created by official palace silkworms. It was one of a kind, which presented Madame Mori with a unique problem.
I was very nervous because the special silk is priceless, and once we cut it, we would never be able to buy it anywhere.
After experimenting on other fabrics, Madame Mori made the final cut. For the design, she chose rose petals to give a lighter, purer, more romantic feel. But there was one more step before the dress could be completed.
The royal family brought out a beautiful wooden tray with the tiara and the diamond necklace that she was going to wear. And they put that on the princess and made sure that her entire body was balanced with the volume of the skirt, so everything looked perfect.
Certainly no bride could have looked more perfect than Masako as she and her new husband rode through the streets of Tokyo in a Rolls-Royce convertible. Over the next 3 days, the newlyweds celebrated at 6 separate banquets held at the Imperial Palace. The palace opened its gates as thousands came to sign the imperial wedding books, giving their new princess a warm welcome. Her wedding day was a triumphant moment for Masako. However, soon after the wedding, the pressure began to mount. It began with a press conference where Masako spoke 7 seconds longer than the prince. The conservative press didn't like it. and there were other criticisms. Gone were the smart business suits, replaced by more demure outfits, including high-heeled shoes, pocketbooks, pillbox hats, and pearl necklaces. Many took this as a sign that Masako's independence was being squashed. But Madame Mori has a simple explanation for the change.
Now that she's married into the royal family, she has become a more sophisticated woman. She is not a girl anymore.
But the greatest criticism of Masako came from the fact that 5 years after her marriage, she still had not produced an heir. Her loving prince stood by Masako's side, telling the press simply, "A stork needs a quiet environment." The questions of a baby is not something Lillian Katz is worried about either.
I always had the feeling with Masako that she was capable of accepting whatever happened in her life and accepting it graciously. And I'm sure that hopefully she will someday have a child. But if it's not to be, she'll still make a wonderful empress.
Naruhito's brother, Akihito, has had better luck when it comes to children. In 1990, he married his college sweetheart, Kiko Kawashima. A year later, Kiko gave birth to little Princess Meiko, and 2 years later to Princess Keiko. And Akihito has another imperial first to his credit. He has installed computers in his house, making him the first imperial prince to be online. As for the rest of the imperial family, they live as quietly as possible. Throughout his reign, Emperor Akihito has tried in some ways to live as normally as possible.
He has brought about some changes that might seem comically small to us. For instance, he stops at traffic lights now. And so he tries not to completely disrupt the life of Tokyo or wherever he's traveling.
The 29-year-old Princess Nori remains unmarried and lives at home with her parents. And while the Emperor and Empress are still very protective of their privacy, they have offered a few glimpses into their lives. In a rare 1989 interview, the Emperor revealed intimate details of his life, such as the number of ties he has in his wardrobe, 50, and his favorite authors, Shakespeare and Sir Walter Scott. It may not seem like much to us, but it's certainly a far cry from the days centuries ago when a mere commoner could be killed for even looking at the emperor. Today, a ray of light is focused on the imperial family, disclosing small yet personal details about their lives. And the chrysanthemum throne appears to be blossoming under the brightness. Transportation provided by Delta Airlines. Accommodations provided by Tokyo's Imperial Hotel. Wardrobe provided by Lord & Taylor.